We have an extended program today because we are going to be going straight into our next segment, which is the diaspora. We are going to be talking with Mr. Rickford Burke, who is in the room. Yes, Rickford, we thank you very much for your patience. Dr. Hines, thank you very much for your patience as we have this extended program today. We're scaling up people today because first we had Dr. Adams scaling up the vice president and this 14 billion flaring, and then we had Priya Manikchan saying that the first or second smart classroom established in 2014, conveniently forgetting the hundreds of things that were done in the public telecommunications industry under the APNU-AFC. But good afternoon to you, gentlemen, and let's get right into this segment. Mr. Burke, I know that you were busy. I saw a town hall meeting recently, a town hall staff meeting. Tell us about that.
Well, we can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Doc. We wanted to have a town hall meeting because a lot of young people, first, second, third generation Guyanese in the diaspora, didn't really know what the Venezuela border issue was about, and they kept asking us what's about, and asking that we do something at town hall or some sort of information session to inform them about what the border issue was about. And as the issue became more intense, we decided that we needed to do this because we also had misinformation and a lack of information, a lack of the truth coming out of Guyana from this installed government. And so we wanted to do that to highlight the facts, the history, the evolution of this border issue, and how this government has completely provoked another crisis and have completely mishandled that crisis. So we want to do that. I think we achieved that. We've gotten a lot of feedback. Persons are much more educated and aware of the situation. And then we'll do another one on the U.S. ambassador and the role that she's played, and the role that we are playing here to make sure that there's a new U.S. ambassador.
All right. Thank you for that. Dr. Let me jump in here. I listened to the vice president recently, and I took note of a particular thing. He said that the APNU-AFC can only talk about race. The only thing they can talk about. Apparently, hasn't been focusing on all the craziness that his administration is doing that we're talking about. But it seems as if this idea of race and us talking about racial equality and talking about social inclusion and equity is really troubling the vice president. Your thoughts? Your mic.
Yes, sorry. There's an old saying among those of us who study race, is that those who are racially mischievous and who are racist would like to shut down the conversation on race. Please don't like you to talk about eating, So they are the ones who are preoccupied with race because they're the ones who govern in a racial way. I have gone on record to say that my study of the Guyana's political history is that the PPP is much more steeped in racial governance than the PNP. And I say that without fear of contradiction. In fact, some of us think the PNC, they're away from race. Right. The fact of the matter is that the PPP's praxis is grounded in race. And so therefore, one should be also that nonsense. I've always challenged him, so come let us have a conversation on race. And he has shied away.
Mr. Burke, you are not in comments yourself. You are seen as some sort of inciter the diaspora Your thoughts on what has been happening, and especially those words from Mr. Jack.
Well, first of all, the people will not set my agenda, determine what my conversation is going to be like. We are pointing out to the world the racist policies and the racism and the fascism of the PPP regime. I don't care what they say. So long as they're racist, we're going to continue to point it out. What they're trying to do is to establish what I call an ethno-fascist regime in Ghana, PPP apartheid. And they don't want people to talk about it. And they think they can shut people up. They can't shut me up. I'm pretty sure they can't shut up Dr. Hines. Bar Jagdeo is the chief architect of the modern day political, the modern day PPP racist regime. He is a damn racist. And we're not saying that because we feel like saying that. We're saying that because of his actions, because of his policies. He's a damn racist. And we're going to take stern action against them to block them from accessing international help if they continue along this line. And listen, I went to Hindu college. I don't have to advertise my bona fides with regard to my culture and my beliefs. What the PPP and their supporters believe is that they alone have a voice. They alone belong to Guyana, or Guyana alone belongs to them alone. And they must control everything. And anybody who has a different view must either be killed or shut up. That's it. There's no middle ground with the people, right? You either join us or be killed or don't exist or shut up. I don't subscribe to their views. I'm not scared of them. I'm not like the family of Joel and Isaiah Henry rated that they're terrorizing. If there to be something, I believe in eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. But at the same time, I also want to say that we all believe in racial harmony, but there can be racial harmony when there's a racist government. We see how the young people in this country that I live, that Dr. Hines lives, tore this country apart because of racial injustice. I'm not advocating violence or anything. I'm saying there must be a reckoning with the PPP. They can't jump back into this current term in office, albeit installed, with the same policies that they continued from 1992. And that is, it's unfathomable to me that they think that they can get away with it, that we can speak out. Now, John is talking about racism. We got to talk about racism because we have a racist government in place. If you don't want us to talk about racism, stop it. Have equitable policies, right? Conduct the government in an inclusive way where all Guyanese can feel that they're part of Guyana and they can benefit from the national patrimony of the country and resources. Now, I heard today, right, that the Army submitted their list for promotion and they rejected it, primarily orchestrated by Jagdeo. Rejected it and say they don't want X officer, Y officer, or Z officer promoted. What? An officer is in the force for decades, and because you have a perception of him, he's perfectly qualified, he's efficient, he's doing his job, but because this racist set of extremist Indians in the PPP have a certain view of certain officers, they must not make progress professionally, and then you're asking the same officers to go and defend the country when you provoke a crisis with Venezuela. It's unacceptable. It's not, and I'm not promoting any sort of disobedience among any agency in government. But I'm saying that if you're going to have a war on the people who don't vote, who you perceive didn't vote for you, you can't come and tell us that Venezuela is having an unjust war when you have an unjust internal war against people who look a certain way. So I don't understand. I think the PP needs to get rid of Bar Jagdeo. Bar Jagdeo is a blight on the country. He is coming with this 1963 racist animosity and racism, and I think it's going to work in the 21st century. I think it's going to work in 2021. No, and I am saying today that even if we have to beat them into the ground, we'll do it. Guyana belongs to everybody. If you notice, they came into the government rushing. They want to take over everything, grab all the land, grab all the property, take over this, run the oil industry. There's a big corruption scandal that's about to break. Already, they're not even government funds. A massive corruption scandal is about to break with how they've awarded and who they've awarded these oil contracts to. That's to sell the Guyana's lift, to sell Guyana's portion of the oil that is being produced. Massive corruption, and it's going to come out in the coming days.
Yeah, our 2% royalty. All right, so Dr. Hines, let me bring you in here. Recently, Member of Parliament Amanda Walton Desir, who is the Shadow Minister of International Relations, Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, a very interesting point when she said, as she's speaking to Minister Todd, she reminded him that the unity and cooperation that is required for us to deal with Venezuela is not being fostered by the PPP's actions, by the firings, by their conduct and their behavior towards the people, especially Afro-Guyanese. And we see them closing down things for no reason. And one of the latest, of course, from Collins College, and give some flimsy excuse about the money could be used elsewhere when we pump in money into sugar and waste it. Your thoughts on them and their actions and how that fosters the unity we need to deal with Venezuela?
Yes, Mr. Zero is quite right. You can't want to take action that provokes unity and then call for unity. And that's how the CPT has been operating. They want healing and peace on their terms. And when you live in a plural society, you are only going to get healing and unity when there is a consensus on the way forward. And our country is far from a state of consensus. But let me try to put some things in a larger context, because I'm frustrated by the discourse among some developments that is going on around some developments. I heard Dr. Vincent earlier on in the program exposing the fact that the technical explanation that was given by Mr. Jack Dio that has tied the hands of the EPA, that is a lie. I will concede and agree with Mr. Jacko that their hands are tied, but it's not tied by any decision, as Dr. Vincent explained. It is tied by the fact that they are in office via regime change. When you exchange power, you're being in power with big and powerful entities, it will come back to bite you. The PPP is a product of regime change. They were able to create a narrative, and the Americans, the British, and all those, the Commonwealth and all of them, took that narrative, put their international influence and reputation, and they validated that narrative. And that narrative was important in organizing international support against the coalition government. You know, when people ask the regime change, how did the Americans change the regime? Well, the Americans put their enormous influence and power behind the PPP's narrative. And so therefore the PPP gladly accepted being put in office. And now you cannot tell Exxon anything because you have sold your soul to Exxon. And Exxon understands that. When the United States acts on behalf of multinational corporations, multinational company. And so Exxon knows that it has scope to do what it is doing without any censorship from the PPP government, who announced that Taiwan was opening an office in Guyana. Americans.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Dr. Hines, if you can continue, I will bring recording on that because it seems as if our foreign policy is now being run out of the embassy in Georgetown.
Yes, the foreign policy has been outsourced to a law firm in America. The same law firm that was hired by the PPP to help it to seize power. And so, therefore, when Jack Joe says that the cabinet did not give its okay for the decision on Taiwan, he's right. They give the okay since in August. They give the okay in August. They don't want to give any okay anymore, you know? And that is the kind of governance that we are going to have. One China policy is 49 years old. In those 49 years from 1972, the PNC were in power for 25 of those years, and the PPP in 24 of those years. So both parties accepted the one China policy. What the PPP must ask is why the sudden change in the one China policy. The sudden change has to do with the fact that the PPP has been installed in government. Oh, let me put that here before I end. In 1964, the Americans played with our country, and they were behind the ousting of one party and the installment of the other party. But here's the big difference. The BNC was installed in 1964. Mr. Burnham never became a puppet of the Americans. In fact, at the end of the day, Mr. Burnham outmaneuvered the Americans. To put in power, but like Marxist-Leninist, right? This PPP government has been installed in power, and what we've seen thus far, they are a puppet of the United States of America.
Right. Let me bring you in here, Rick Ford. I know you asked about Sarah and what is happening, Auntie Sarah at the embassy. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to Guyanese that such a presumptuous move was made by the embassy to kind of usurp the foreign affairs ministry and make such a momentous announcement. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, she's not my auntie. I seriously feel the Guyanese people. Listen, I have never seen it stunning. I have never seen anything like this anywhere in the world. Where I think I would want to amend a little what Dr. Hines just said. I don't think they're the puppets of the United States. They're puppet of Sarah Lynch. And I think particularly what Sarah Lynch was doing is completing the policy of the Trump administration to undermine China before the Biden administration can fully formulate its foreign policy. She was trying to tie the hands of the Biden administration in continuing the Trump policy to undermine China. And we'll see some changes with regard to the China policy as announced by President Biden already. He is going to take a less confrontational approach, and his diplomacy is going to be the first tool of his international policy or foreign policy. Now, I want to come back to what Dr. Hines just said about 49 years of one China policy. And the reason we've had that policy because China has done a lot to the country. And China considers Taiwan to be a rogue state or a rogue province. And so it's most countries in the world observe that policy. It doesn't mean that you can't have relations with Taiwan or interact with Taiwan. where you don't recognize Taiwan diplomatically as a separate state from China because of the implications of your relationship with China. Now, if China begins to administer sanctions on Guyana, it's going to cripple us, right? China has done so many projects, developmental projects for our country. Why interrupt or disrupt the relationship with China to execute an outdated Trump foreign policy? And that's how dangerous this ambassador is to our country. I believe that she thinks she's the boss of the foreign minister. So what happened is that between their lobbyists in Washington and the embassy, they apparently decided to go ahead, and Barjab there fully well knows. Barjab there fully well knows that this didn't come just from Mr. Todd, the foreign minister. This was a conscious decision by the PPP. My understanding from my sources in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that they had an announcement that at a certain time they would make an announcement backed up by the American ambassador. They got cold feet and didn't make the announcement because they realized the pressure would come on it. But she's bold, she ran out of the country, so she went ahead with the appointment and with the announcement. But that arrangement came very early on in their that agreement with Taiwan wasn't just signed last week. It was secretly signed before, and it was facilitated by the U.S. ambassador. So she's running the country, and she's operating like if Guyana is a cotton picking plantation. And we have some weak guys in the PPP who worship white people. They think they're the best people in the world. I hate to break it down like that. So they're so obligated to Sarah Lynch, who put them in power. I wouldn't say the U.S. government, because we have a new administration who I'm sure will have a different foreign policy. But they are committed to her. It's done tremendous damage to our China relations. It's going to take a lot of work to get it back. I'm sure Chinese don't trust us anymore. In addition to that, this is how dangerous this ambassador is for our country. She has been working with the PPP government, the PPP, since before they came into power, to facilitate the Trump ambitions of our excursion of trying to overthrow Maduro, the president of Venezuela. They have been playing footsie with the Trump administration and OAS, and they very, I think, misguidedly enter into these negotiations for joint patrols when it was not needed, right? And so that provoked Maduro and the first lashing out at Guyana. It's like how the Middle Eastern countries all, when America provoked them, they lash out at Israel. That's what Maduro is doing. So we weren't making decisions in the best interest of, the PPP. Wasn't in their discussions with the Trump people. They weren't making decisions in the best interest of Guyana because they would have been more cautious. They provoked this current crisis with Venezuela. And they're completely depending on the U.S. ambassador to get them out of the crisis. But there's a new sheriff in town in Washington. And I don't think that we'll see the kind of foreign policy that the Trump administration had and entanglement with the people that the Trump administration has. And so we have to be very careful how we navigate this crisis with Venezuela. Right now, we're told that Venezuelan intelligence officers, soldiers, are patrolling Guyana's territory. They're on the land in Guyana. And the government is not saying anything, right? Because they don't want to alarm the population, I guess. How could we have foreign invaders in the country? They're invading our waters, regardless of the fact we have joint patrols. And the government is not saying anything. They have completely botched our foreign policy. They have provoked two international incidents, crises, and they've completely mismanaged it. That's why I agree with Amanda Watson, the Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs, that Mr. Tutt should resign. And it's troubling when you see they're making all these blunders in public policy and foreign policy and national security policy, and they're dismantling the public service college that teaches and imparts knowledge about the governance and how these policies are conceived and formulated and implemented. So they will continue to blunder. They'll continue to create these international incidents because they have no clue what they're doing.
I want to speak to a few things before I ask Dr. Hines to respond. The ministry came out and said that they signed the Taiwan agreement based on a miscommunication. I don't know how that can happen. I felt insulted as a Guyanese. So you tell me that you signed an entire international agreement on some miscommunication. But on the issue of them forcing the Biden administration's hand, we saw them in the last minutes of this is the Trump administration, last minutes, so to speak, of their term, signing a lot of international agreements, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be in the Latin America. And Guyana was just one example of that. If you talk about the joint patrol agreement, Dr. Hines, how do we move forward now with foreign policy, given it seems as though we would have given up a lot?
Yes, we're at war with Venezuela, and we are in a cold war with China. Small countries like Guyana have no business in conflict between big countries, have no business. And so we are an endangered country at the moment. What it means, Randall, is the opposition has to now act differently from how the traditional opposition operated. The opposition now has to act as an alternative government and has to come up with an alternative foreign policy that it puts before the people of Guyana and that it lobbies on the international scene. We have to begin to act like the freedom fighters who are fighting against the apartheid regime in South Africa. We have to be active in the United Nations. We have to go back to the OAS and educate them about the mistake they made by allowing themselves to become part of a conspiracy to change a member government. We have to do the same thing with the Commonwealth. So I'm calling here for a complete